Let's look at Charlie Kirk today, because obviously there's some people that really dislike this guy. There's some people that love him. There's some people in the middle. We're all going to kind of give our opinion about him, I'm sure, at some point. But where did he get his millions from? And the truth is actually very different. So how much money does he get paid by his nonprofit that he started, Turning Point USA? His salary is around, so here's a little bit of a twist to the story. Charlie Kirk recently did a video called Gen Z is Taking Drastic Measures Just to Live. And in this video, they talked about how the younger generation in the USA can't afford homes, and the first-time home buyer now, the average age is 38 years old. Almost 40. Like, that's crazy to me when I heard that. Okay, so we've all seen the founders of nonprofits getting hit with a lot of accusatory remarks about where they got their millions of dollars from, whether they were scraping money off the top of the foundation or somehow taking advantage of people's donations. Let's look at Charlie Kirk today, because obviously there's some people that really dislike this guy. There's some people that love him. There's some people in the middle. We're all going to kind of give our opinion about him, I'm sure, at some point. But where did he get his millions from? So I just Googled, how much is Charlie Kirk worth, right? And I found a couple different numbers, but they're all pretty similar. One website said he's worth about $12 million. Another website said he's probably worth about $14 million. It's probably a little higher than that. I would guesstimate, just based on my other research that I found. I'm guessing it's a little higher than that. They probably don't know exactly how much money he has, but they attributed his money to podcasting success, public speaking tours, nonprofit ventures, and media contracts. So he's got a wide variety of different things. But I think it's funny that this is where, when you actually read the sites that guess how much people are worth, this is what they said he got his money out of. And the truth is actually very different. Charlie Kirk actually did not make most of his money from any of these things. So, and a lot of people would be shocked to hear that. So how much money does he get paid by his nonprofit that he started, Turning Point USA? His salary is around $300,000 a year. Now, this nonprofit does over $100 million. I think it's close to like $130 million a year. It's insanely huge as far as nonprofits go. It's massive, right? But $300,000 is a small fraction of that, right? Like it's a tiny salary compared to how much they do, but it's a decent salary. $300,000 a year is not a small amount, right? But factor in the fact that he also donates on average $350,000 back to Turning Point USA every year. He's not making any money at all from this nonprofit. And in fact, he did not even take a salary in the first 5 years that the nonprofit did not take a salary at all. And now he donates more than his salary back to the nonprofit. So is he making money off his nonprofit? The answer is directly, no. Indirectly, obviously, there's other ways you can make money. So where does his millions come from, right? Where does his money come from? So I found an article called Charlie Kirk Net Worth Hits $12 Million Through Conservative Media Empire. And obviously, and this is what they say, Charlie Kirk's sitting on a cool $12 million at just 31 years old. And honestly, the guy's basically turned being controversial into a full-time cash machine. And they couldn't be more wrong, actually. So Charlie Kirk recently did an interview with the Iced Coffee Hour. If y'all have never heard of that, it's a YouTube channel. These guys do some really cool work, and they just uncover a whole lot of different stories. They did a lengthy interview with him, and one of the segments, they talked about money. So they just asked him straight up, where'd you get your money from, right? And he just went through the list. And so obviously he talked about not taking a salary from Turning Point, all that kind of stuff. But this is what he said. He said, I'm a big investor. He said, I have a great team that does it. He said,
probably over 75 to 80% of all the money I make is invested.
Nice.
Wow. Then he's got a significant amount of investments.
He's got significant amount of investments. So obviously he writes books, he speaks, he does things like that, and he does get money from those things outside of Turning Point, as an individual. So there are other ways that he does make money, but he also, he partners with people and he flips houses. So he's got a team of guys that flips houses for him. He's got a bunch of mutual funds, a bunch of index funds. This is the thing that I was like shocked at his response. And I actually love what he said.
I went all in and bought the dip during the tariff stuff and COVID.
Fantastic.
During COVID, I bought triple leverage, triple Q.
No, you
Of course I did, yeah.
What do you mean,
What do you mean,
of course
of
you
course?
did?
He said he bought the S&P 500, the stock market. He bought during the huge COVID dip and during the tariff dip. And he not only did he invest heavily during those dips, but he did a triple leverage. So when you leverage something 3 times, essentially what you're saying is it's an ETF leveraged. So what you're saying is, hey, I am going to bet that this is going to do really well. And if it goes up 1%, I make 3%. If it goes down 1%, I lose 3%. So essentially, it's like you're literally 3 times Xing your gain or your loss. So he was betting heavily, and he admitted like it's the biggest bet he's ever done. But they were like, why on earth would you do that? And these are like super smart guys, and they were like shocked, you know. And they're like, why on earth would you do that, right? Like, what drove you to this madness? And he was like, it was easy bet. And he said
it was the easiest bet I've ever made in my life.
Why?
You're in a bet against America.
Dang.
Betting on America. And this was his
That's
point.
a mic drop thing.
Yeah. His point was, he said it wasn't an alien invasion. It wasn't a meteor strike.
That's true.
He said these are
process.
things that we could reverse immediately if we just worked at it. You know, and he was like, America's stronger than that. Right? Yeah. America's stronger than this. You know, like when COVID hit, that was his thought process. America's stronger. I'm gonna invest when it's a good opportunity. You know, the tariffs. America's stronger than this. I'm gonna invest. And I was like, whoa, that's crazy. You know, and even these guys that were like super financial geniuses were like, we didn't even think about that. You know, like we're not even thinking that direction. You know, and I was like, that's crazy. So a lot of his money has come, you know, and obviously he made a huge killing because of investing in those times. But a lot of his money has come through investments. I'm going to talk about his motivation in a second. But yeah, what are y'all's thoughts initially? And then I'm going to get into a couple other things here and kind of a twist of the story.
Did he invest in GameStop? That's what I want to know.
Probably not.
No.
So I'm fascinated by that. I had no idea that he was that into investing. And I mean, to have 75% of his income, like I talked with a very wealthy guy that has, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars invested. And he was telling me that like, if you can get to a point where you want to live off of your investments, that's several $1 million that you have to have, but you need to be able to have 5% of that taking it out to be able to continue to grow at the same time. And so, I mean, that's fascinating that I'm actually very impressed by that. I think I'm very happy to hear that. And I thought we were going to be talking about, he's paid too much, you know, to lead this multi-million-dollar nonprofit and all that. But if you compare it to similar sized companies, you know, and so I think that's awesome. I had no idea he was into any of that stuff. I think kudos to him.
So even to compare his salary, I worked for a nonprofit. I used to work for a nonprofit that they did roughly $15 million per year. And the founder took a salary of $175,000 per year. So, like, I mean, it was probably 1/4 or 1/5 of what Turning Point does as far as the money, but the salary was only half, you know, of what Charlie Kirk. It was half of what Charlie Kirk takes. So it's like Charlie Kirk is not a $300,000 per year salary is not large at all for what the organization does every year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if it was a company, there would be probably stock options as well, and that you get discounts and all kinds of stuff. And a lot of a lot of companies require you to have a certain amount of your wealth coming from that stock of that company, so then you're invested to do the best thing for the company. That's fascinating. I think that's great to hear that about Charlie Kirk. I respect that a lot.
Yeah, I think it's really cool. It honestly just makes me think about my own finances investing, because I have never done anything really. What's the word? Like I haven't put like a major bet ever on like investments. You know, I've always done stuff that's pretty like safe.
Never
just kind of like, you know, you just purchase the same stuff every month. And so you get the highs and you get the lows, you know, that kind of strategy, instead of the like, the market really took a dip, I'm going to throw a lot of cash in the market right now. But I also have not yet been in the situation where I felt like I had a bunch of cash lying around that I was like, if I threw this in the market and my bet wasn't correct, I was like, how exactly would I explain that to my wife? And we'd just be like, hey, you know that 10 grand that we had lying around that we thought like, you know, maybe we could buy a car or something, you know, it's just like, it's gone. I put it all in Dogecoin, and it turns out that that was not going to go to the moon, or I bought at the height. And
that's a legitimate concern. It's a learning curve. When I first started investing, I did invest in a couple stocks that literally went to pennies, and I was like, "Oh, that's painful." But because I like it so much, I just kept doing it and reinvesting and trying to figure out but I would never like invest massive amounts of money into one stock. So you have to diversify a little bit, and that's where I was saved on that. Most of my stuff turned out pretty all right, or at least not bad. And
that's what Charlie Kirk did. I mean, he diversified. It was not that he invested in one company. He just invested the market is down. Well, I'm going to buy at the bottom of the market, but not just the bottom of the market. I'm going to do the triple the triple down thing, the triple X thing of like, I don't even know.
Well,
you have a certain amount of money in order to make. I don't even know how a normal person.
You might have to have
bet.
a certain amount of money. Some of the things Charlie Kirk has done, he's only able to do because he has a certain amount of money. So
Yeah.
like, also, I didn't mention he does private equity deals. I mean, if you ever watched like Shark Tank, right? It's kind of that idea of you know, capital investments or whatever. You know, like you're a capital investor. You're investing in startup businesses, things like that. People are only going to approach you and ask for that. You know, or you're only going to have those opportunities if you have a certain amount of money to invest.
The saying goes, you have to have money to make money.
Yeah,
Sure.
I have a question for you though, Doug, because they asked him about specific stocks and crypto and stuff, and he's like, no, I don't do that. I don't do like specific things. Like I don't just pick this and then invest. He said what he does invest in though, and I was like, I've never heard of this. He said he has invested in Anagram, which he described as a building block for all the different cryptos. And it was like a company that, I was like, I've never heard of that before. I did a little research. I had a hard time even finding their website. But I was like, I've never heard of that, Doug. I figured you might know something about that. Maybe not, you know, but that's something that I'm probably going to look into just because I'm curious.
Actually, no, surprisingly enough, I don't know anything about Anagram.
He described it as like the plumbing. If crypto was a house, he described it as like the plumbing that gets put in underneath every single crypto. And I was like, what
so
the
it
heck?
must be, I'm guessing here, just like spitballing, it sounds like it's actually a company that excuse me, sounds like it's a company that provides some sort of infrastructure for crypto. But it makes me wonder what platform that's on, like because there are different kinds of cryptos, you know. So
Again, it could be maybe a private equity thing. You know, I don't know. It could be that like he literally knows somebody and just like put money into the company. I don't know, but
you know, I got to say this before I forget. I know somebody that put a bunch of money into one crypto, and I don't remember what it was. I can find out what it was, and his dad, he had him also put like 10 grand in or something, and it went down to like $500. And he said, just hang on to it. It's going to come back. And his is worth like $500,000 now. Like, I guess you did your research. Good job. It's just crazy.
It's a venture capitalist company. They based on the Solana ecosystem. So yeah, it's a digital assets holding company, venture capital firm. So yeah, that makes sense. So he basically, what he's saying is he didn't really probably know a whole lot about crypto, but he trusted this company and invested in them, and they knew enough that they did it for him, essentially.
Okay, yeah. So he's just diversifying, without picking single things.
Yeah,
that makes sense. So here's a little bit of a twist to the story. Charlie Kirk recently did a video called "Gen Z is taking drastic measures just to live," and in this video, he interviewed Sagar and Getty, who's the host of Breaking Points, and they talked about how the younger generation in the USA can't afford homes, and the first-time home buyer now is the average age is 38 years old, almost 40. Like that's crazy to me when I heard that. Yeah, dang. The average first-time home buyer is 38. The median was even higher, it was like in the 50s, or it was crazy. But they talk about how like the debt weight has made it very difficult for people to buy homes at a young age since the 1970s. They talk about things like school loans, how that increased since then, credit card companies and the interest rates that they're allowed to charge. They even talked about like should the government be putting a restriction on the interest rates of credit cards, things like that. They even talked about things like sports betting, you know, where it's like you can literally borrow money from a sports betting company online. You can leverage credit with them to bet on a team, lose all of that, and then have to pay them. It's like bet now, pay later. You know, like
wow.
It's really, and then people are super into this stuff. But so they talked about that, and they were looking at it from the perspective of another problem they mentioned was like how the best high-end jobs, best paying jobs are in the most high cost places in the world, unless you're working remote or something, you know, in the United States. Anyways, so this guy, Sagar and Getty, talks about how it's up to the government to fix these issues. Like we need to fix the problem because the government needs to fix these problems because young adults, you know, can't buy houses, they can't have kids and all this stuff. And I'm like listening to it and I'm like, man, I understand that these are all problems. I'm a huge anti-debt person. You know, I hate debt. I think we should all not get into debt. We should be very careful with that. But at the same time, I'm like, I think it has more that it's more than just the government's problem or even society's problem or even the credit card companies or whatever. I think young adults are not just having kids because the economy is so bad, or not just saving for house or being able to afford housing because the economy is so bad. That's part of it. But could it be a cultural issue as well? Because like, this is just me, but if I had to guess, I would say the average young adult who has the desire, and there's a social construct in like dream, almost like a Disney style dream that's been built up for them now, is probably much higher than it was in the 1970s and before that. This idea of, I am going to live this lavish like singlehood lifestyle, where I'm going to focus on a career, or I'm going to have fun, or I'm going to visit, I'm going to travel, I'm going to visit all these cities. I'm going to be, like the Instagram lifestyle has been, and social media has obviously played into this, but it's been built up so much that in my mind, I'm looking at me being a young adult and marrying my wife, and us getting pregnant in the first 3 months of our marriage, and then there's a kid on the way. I was making $500 a week. She was working at Starbucks. We lived in a 250 square foot cottage, which essentially was a shack with running water, and I'm sitting there going, and then my weekly pay gets cut from $500 a week to $350 a week. And I'm like, we are all going to die, and this baby's going to starve if I don't start making more money, And I'm looking at, if that had not happened, there's no way I would have ever been motivated to make more money, to work harder, and to get creative with, okay, I got to think of other side hustles. I got to think of other things that I can do. There's no way I ever would have gotten to that point so quickly if we hadn't start having kids, if that makes sense, and I wouldn't have been thinking like, I need to save for a house. I would not have been thinking responsibly about where the money's going. We would have traveled a lot more. We would have spent the money on things. And instead we protected what we had because of the people that we had to protect. Now we started having kids, right? So there's my question to y'all. What do y'all think? Do you think it's a government problem? Do you think it's a society problem? Do you think it's a young person, a young adult problem? What are y'all's thoughts on that?
Yes.
Well, yeah, for me, go ahead, Reese.
Okay, I'll start. So statistically, you are accurate talking about the marriage thing, because if you are married, you're more likely to have more wealth. Like, married men have more wealth over time than non-married men. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But what part of it is, like what you're talking about, is that basically that stability and that motivation.
There's other values that come along with that.
Right. The values that come along with it means like where you're like, okay, this is what we need. This is what I need to do for my family. You're much more motivated in order to, to make a certain level of money, however it is, even if it's not your dream job, or even if it's hard, or if it's tough. If you have a family, you have to provide for your family. So there's elements to that that's like, and then there's, stability, and there's motivation that comes from those kinds of things. That's like, yeah, if you're married, you're statistically, you're probably going to be better off, like later on in life, have more money than somebody that was just single the whole time. And maybe because they actually just spent their money on other things. I do think there's a lot to be said about the economy right now. I do think there's a lot to be said about inflation and how inflation has caused everything to be more expensive and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot to be said there. However, there's also, at the same exact time, there is a trend, and you can see this in every single country. It's a cultural trend of, as things get, the country gets wealthier, and as a certain standard of living increases, once you hit a certain point, the country is no longer able to sustain high birth rates. The birth rates plummet. And it's just really, we could talk about that a lot. Why is that the case? And that is clearly cultural. It's not. I was listening to Thomas, what is his name? Thomas Sowell, economist, the other conservative economist guy. And he was talking about how these things that people talk about now, he was a kid during the Great Depression. And he was talking about how people are like, nowadays, people are like, oh, the old people, we need to euthanize them because our society can't. We can't afford to have all these old people lying around who aren't contributing anything. And they're like, and we can't afford to have kids anymore. Like, that's why everyone wants to be single and stuff like that. And he was like, I grew up in the Great Depression. I was living in a shack without running water in the woods, and we just made it work. And they're like, our expectations were just smaller. We're like, we got jobs when we could get jobs. If we didn't get jobs, like, we stayed with family members. They're like, we had no money, and we took in elderly relatives and took care of them until they passed away. And it was just normal. It's just everybody did it. So I do think there is something cultural to be said. Definitely.
Wow.
So my thoughts, I would say it's the cause is a combination of those things, but I would say the government should not be the one to come in and solve this. And the only way they should solve this is by working on the environment that people live in this society, in our culture, and in the U.S. In other words, getting rid of regulations, making it easier to start businesses, make it easier to. It's not more control. I mean, like normally when governments solve these kinds of problems, they do it in a way that may solve one problem, like get rid of debt for somebody or help them buy a house, but it doesn't. It creates 3 or 4 more problems. And I can give a few examples of those. Like you have the welfare expansion that was trying to get rid of poverty and inequality. And all it did was disincentivize work in some populations. It was a breakdown of the family due to the benefit structure. It had intergenerational dependence on government programs. And there was trillions spent. And there was really no little long-term reduction in poverty. It did not get rid of poverty. It's ridiculous. Or student loan subsidies. So you saw skyrocketing tuition. You saw those kinds of things. Minimum wage is another thing. Reduces entry-level job opportunities. It has increased automation. That's not a bad thing, though. That's a good thing. But you just have small business struggle. And I mean, there's just all this Obamacare, Affordable Care Act. You have all the negative things that come out of this government trying to fix something. And so there's a way to fix it, but it needs to be done in a way that is helping society. So like we talk about, if you're going to give money, then it needs to be, if they're going to give money to people to help buy houses, which I'm all for. I benefited from that buying my first house. I received like an $8,000 check or something to help with that. And that's great, but the thing is, it was something that was sustainable, and it was something that jump-started something, but people weren't getting loans that they couldn't pay back. It wasn't creating more problems. Like it made sense because it was like for a down payment, so it's not like putting them in a loan that they can't afford or something like that. So for me, I do think it's a combination of all this. I think it's a combination of economic things in the U.S. I think it's a combination of people, our education system not providing practical education. I mean, I was always raised, you don't spend more than you make. I mean, it's pretty simple. Like you pay your credit card off every month. And it was like, so, I mean, I think that has a lot to do with it as well. And then obviously if that gets lost in a generation, well, the next one, it's not going to be taught. And so we need to start bringing that back. So the government should be doing if they're doing anything, it should take the short term into account, the long term, and the medium term, and also all people groups. And maybe they could do an education focused thing where they're trying to just help people understand how to live better and those sorts of things. But how to even do that, needs to be done there's low cost ways to do that.
If the government were to do anything, in my opinion, it needs to get out of everything. The government needs to do something, as in it needs to do less. It needs to get its hands out of all of the things that we're involved. Like it's no more, like lessen the regulations on things. Like, for example, trying to open up a business right now is one of the hardest things to do because of all the regulatory red tape that you have to go work through or that's up against you. And it's really frustrating to just see how much constriction the government has put on people being able to make money and be innovative and entrepreneurs and all of that. And a good example is I tried to open up a business recently, like a baking kind of business, right? And I was looking into starting small, maybe doing some cottage food things because I'm really good at baking and I love doing it. And so I was trying to do that, and I was looking at even something as simple as how do I get into selling my baked goods at the local farmers market? Well, the local farmers market had so many regulations pinned on it that I had to follow and so many different things that I had to do. I was like, I may as well open up an actual shop before I go try to get into the farmers market. That's how many regulations there were. Like it felt like that. That's obviously exaggerating and dramatizing a little bit, but I just gave up on the whole thing. So I was like, you know what? I'm not even going to bother opening up a business until I actually have a whole lot of money in my pocket to do it with. So I don't have to worry about the headache that it takes to make this happen. And that's government overreach. We need to get them out so that people can actually just be entrepreneurs and do what they need to do to make the money and get ahead in life, because government is just, their hands are stuck way too much in our lives and they need to. Yeah.
And that's another thing. I mean, even business licensing is a big issue. Like when I was in Iowa, there were all kinds they passed bills. I mean, if somebody was to be a barber, they had to go through all kinds of stuff and go to these elite schools and things, and it was just insane to how much that they had. And it's like if somebody did that in another state and then they came to this state, well, now they got to go through the whole thing again. It's like it's insanity. And so that business or occupational licenses are also another big thing. Now there are places like civil engineer, and you're making bridges and stuff. Like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. You got to have a license, but something.
But if you're going to open up a bake shop and you're not good at it, then the
market will restrict you. Like that's the issue. It will control itself.
Yeah.
You burned all my brownies, Doug. I'm not buying from here anymore.
That's awesome to know, man. I think you should just get a little trailer and make a food truck and just go do it on your lot somewhere, man.
But once again, it comes down to you have to have money to make money. Like, I don't have $20,000 laying around to go buy a little trailer that would actually meet all of the local requirements that I have to meet.
So many requirements, even for a food truck. It's crazy. Yeah.
That was the other thing. By the time you're done buying a food truck, you may as well just go open up.
Do it out of your garage.
Storefront.
Do it out of your garage. There you go.
Well, I'm going to wrap this up. I think it's a really good conversation. I'm going to wrap this up with a quote from Charlie Kirk because we talked a little bit about why, the motivation behind making money, right? Obviously, he's married. They have at least one kid, I think, so there's that motivation. He's still fairly young, 31 years old. That's kind of crazy. I'm 5 years older than he is. That's weird to think about.
I'm only 1 year older, 1 year younger than him.
Yeah,
crazy.
So crazy. But anyways, this is what he said when they asked, the why behind it. And he said, what makes me so happy is that I get to impact people's lives. I get to speak truth. I have purpose. And then I also get to make some money while doing it. So I thought that was a pretty good quote there. And it's like not following the money, but following the purpose, I think is definitely the best way to go about it.
Yeah.
So, yep. Great conversation. Thanks, y'all.